Record this. Hello and welcome, friends. I am Dr. Shailesh Kumar Agarwal, Executive Director, Building Materials and Technology Promotion Council, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And today, I am going to conduct an interactive session on emerging construction systems being used in lighthouse projects with international experts. We have with us Professor Michael Relly, BSc Honors, MSc, PhD, Fellow of Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, Head of Department of Built Environment, Faculty of Engineering and Technology, Liverpool, John Moores University, UK, and Professor Anil Sawhney, a dear friend of mine, PhD, Fellow of RICS, Director of Infrastructure Sector, Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, New York, USA. With this little introduction in our Indian style, I warmly welcome both of you and thank you for joining this session. So namaskar from my side, Anilji and Mike. Okay. To my listeners, we three are right now in three different zones. In India, it is night, whereas in USA, it is morning, and in UK, it is afternoon. Am I right, Anilji?
That's absolutely right. It's amazing power of technology.
Yeah. Professor Michael and Professor Anil, as you are aware that Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, initiated Global Housing Technology Challenge India, and you both have been part and parcel of this challenge and associated with various activities of it. In fact, if I recall, Professor Anil Sawhney and myself took this journey of bringing globally proven emerging construction sector technologies to India when Professor Anil was in RICS, India. We both developed a number of documents, if you remember, and together, including a website, multi-attribute evaluation methodologies for emerging systems. That small efforts of ours then has now become a movement, and Government of India is making concerted efforts to bring technology transition in the Indian construction sector. And we wish to become global leaders in times to come. As regards Professor Michael Relly, he did attend Expo. You were very kind, Michael, to attend Expo Cum conference inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister in March 2019, if you recall. You also delivered a keynote lecture in the famous Vigyan Bhavan, Anilji, along with your colleagues. Both of you also helped me greatly with global participation in exposition and challenge. Now I will give you very briefly in 2 minutes the background of the challenge and the technologies which we shortlisted. Through this challenge, we could create a basket of 54 new construction systems which are broadly classified into 6 broad categories. These 6 categories are now being used in 6 lighthouse projects, and the technologies are being projected as construction technologies for the future. These lighthouse projects are also treated as live laboratories, and we have also rolled out a scheme of technograhis who are given online training through e-course and also will be taken to various lighthouse project sites for learning the field level implementation and further replication of technologies in the Indian construction sector. Let me also tell you that the viewers of this session are not only technical professionals, but also faculty and research students, public and private officials, developers, builders, policy makers, construction agencies, startups, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Just to make the discussion complete, if you want, I can very briefly explain you these 6 broad categories. You want me to explain?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So these 6 broad categories. Number 1 is precast concrete construction, which is 2D planar elements being used. This technology is being used in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, state of Tamil Nadu, where structural elements are cast off-site and assembled at the site with emulative connections or wet jointing, as you call it. The another category is precast concrete construction, 3D modular volumetric construction, which we are using at Ranchi. It's a city, it's a capital of state Jharkhand, And here we are making use of various structural modules, 3D modules, with services being manufactured off-site and then erected at site like Lego blocks, one over other. The third category is precast sandwich panel system, which is essentially a drywall construction being used in Indore, in the state of Madhya Pradesh, with structural steel frame. And you both know sandwich panels are primarily drywall construction with a light core sandwich between two outer faces of calcium silicate boards or fiber cement board. The fourth category is very famous aluminum formwork. So we call it monolithic concrete construction. And here we are using another variant of aluminum formwork, which is tunnel formwork. And this technology is being used in a city called Rajkot in the state of Gujarat. It's a customized formwork made up of steel, enabling modular tunnel construction in a single pour by casting walls and slabs together. The fifth category is light gauge steel structure system, which is being used in a northeastern state of Tripura, in a city called Agartala, with structural steel frame. The light gauge steel wall panels are made up of cold form steel with the inner and outer faces of precast concrete panels, and the hollow space is being filled with lightweight concrete at site. And the last category is stay in place formwork system, which is a sacrificial or you call it lost formwork, which acts either as insulation either as an insulation or as an integral part of a structure. So in Lucknow, which is in the state of Uttar Pradesh, UP, we are using PVC stay-in-place wall forms. And this is being used with hot-rolled steel structure frame. These walls are pre-finished walls with PVC facing and filled with concrete at site. So with these brief introduction about the technologies, I'm going to ask you some very commonly raised questions about these systems being used. We will be recording the entire session with the objective that our technograhis, who will be the change agents to bring technology transition in the construction sector, can understand the various facets of these systems and at the same time decode the prevailing misconceptions related with cost, structure and function performance, maintenance, etc. So with this background, if you guys are ready, I can just start firing the questions.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead. And before I ask the first question, if you want to make any opening statement, both of you can make, or otherwise I will start asking questions.
Sure. So thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you in a friendly setting, and so that we can also share our views and our learnings with others. I commend you for all the work that you've done. I met you, I think, maybe 11 years ago when we were all taking baby steps to move this journey forward. And your passion, enthusiasm, and knowledge actually is exemplar, and I can see it shining. While I left India in 2017, I followed your work, and I think you've done wonderful work. We have now seen other regions also take on this challenge of affordable housing. So I think it's so appropriate that you've started a program where national, international experiences can be shared and we can all learn. So with that, I think I'll let Mike give a brief introduction and opening.
Thanks, Anil. And I would really just echo Anil's sentiments there. Shailesh, I really am delighted to be able to be part of this really exciting agenda. It seems a lot longer than 4 years ago that we first met, when I came to Delhi to discuss the mission at that point, and we started to do some development work towards the expo, and finally produced a keynote for you and attended that with some colleagues here from the UK. And I think it's very exciting to be at this point now in the development of the program and seeing it rolling out into an educational strategy as well, which I think is vitally important for embedding the whole of the culture and the technologies that you're seeking to utilize in India. So thank you very much indeed for the invitation. Very proud to be involved.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time. And shall I start the questions now?
Sure.
Yeah. And both of you can answer, both of you can supplement each other, complement each other. or any one of you want to take first, you can take. Choice is yours. Okay. And so the first question is innovation in construction sector. Innovation in construction sector is complex. What strategies can the Indian affordable housing sector use to diffuse and mainstream innovation?
Mike, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that one of the first things I would say is that the innovation in the construction sector is complex, as you say, and that's not unique in the Indian context. It's a global issue. And I think that, numerous commentators over many years have observed that the construction sector is actually quite slow to innovate and quite slow to embrace innovation and R&D. But I think one of the crucial things about embedding this as a strategy in India is that there seems to be a really visible top-down commitment to innovation. And because you have such a large-scale proposition with the mission, and the footprint of the government agenda is really, really visible, I think there's a great opportunity to implement and integrate a whole series of incentives, drivers, and guides to ensure that people do penetrate the innovation market. I think that it's got to be seen by all the people in it to be a bit of a win-win scenario. And I think that both the producers of the buildings, the end users of the buildings, and the designers and the commissioners of them all need to have a very, very visible benefit out of the process and about the integration of innovation. I think a clear narrative around that for companies and end users, I think, is a really important part of it. And the education proposal that you've got now, the proposition that you're putting together with these podcasts and the courses, I think is a vital element in promoting the whole purpose and benefit behind the very base cause of innovation.
So thank you. I think, Mike, you made some excellent points. What I would like to add, Shailesh, is that you've done very well in bringing the design and construction processes together in order to bring about innovation. Because if you think about it, the designers design and then the constructors come in and try to innovate, there is a limit to how much innovation can take place. With the efforts that you put in place, I think getting the designers excited, your work with the School of Planning and Architecture and constructors jointly really makes an impact. Because one of the reasons why innovation gets blocked in the construction sector is the fragmentation between design and construction. And then I'll take it one step further, between construction and operation, maintenance, renewal, and retrofit. So you've made the first step in the journey by integrating the design and construction processes, removing some of the barriers, removing some of the issues of win-lose between a designer and a constructor by bringing these technologies to the forefront. I think your next challenge in this innovation journey is to start bringing some of the information from operation and maintenance early on into the design phase, so that while these technologies are very good, are they going to be equally good 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when the end users are living in these and have to be maintained? So I think that innovation journey now becomes your next challenge or your next step. The other issues surround sharing of data, because you have built up such a wonderful program. I know that you have worked with CPWD, for example, to bring about change in how we do costing of innovative technologies. Now, with that kind of influence from the central government, I think you should also think in terms of creating a data sharing club or a data sharing or a benchmarking initiative where costs can be benchmarked, schedule or time durations can be benchmarked, and best practices can be shared. So while innovation is difficult, but I think you've given that the first steps you have taken have been successful and have clearly demonstrated to the design and construction fraternity that there is benefit of working together. I think you need to now stretch it to the next level and bring other aspects of this whole value chain together also. I think one of the key features I see in the programs that you're running is this aspect of sustainability, because with such a large scale program and innovation that you're bringing should also touch upon the issue of the climate change, sustainability, material shortages, and those aspects. So I think that is an area where, again, you may face difficulties and challenges, but I think you are doing a good job in looking at those aspects also. And lastly, I think it's going to be ultimately about people. Changing their mindsets, changing their knowledge, changing their talent and skills and competencies, which has always been a difficult task. And I can share some experiences from the US when we talk about advanced technologies just in the exterior envelope or shell of a building. If you make changes, like you talked about tunnel form, if you make changes, I'm right now sitting working from home in a building that is essentially a stick-built building, which is made up of lumber, timber-framed structure. If one were to change the timber structure into, let's say, a tunnel form or a solid wall or a SIP panel or anything, what happens is electrical, mechanical, and all other services get disrupted. You need to then train those disrupted disciplines also in order to accommodate or have acceptance of innovation in the exterior wall. So it may seem very simple, it may seem very logical that the superior technology that you're suggesting is definitely better than the timber frame structure that we are in right now. But because we displace and disrupt the workers, their skills and training of especially services, we need to think about training. So I really think with you taking steps simultaneously to address the skills, competencies, and training, it is definitely something that can overcome the barriers or blockers to innovation.
Thank you. Thank you. My next question is, currently the focus is on design and construction aspects of affordable housing. How can the sector begin to take a whole of life approach and bring upfront data and expertise from the operation and maintenance phases?
Sure. So I think maybe continuing from the previous discussion that we just had, what I say is our industry needs to think about vertical, horizontal, and longitudinal integration, meaning we need to integrate our life cycle steps, design, construction, operation, maintenance. We need to integrate vertically with our project team members, designers, constructors, subcontractors, vendors, suppliers. And we also need to learn from project to project, which means longitudinal. So the first aspect, which I think is becoming very crucial given our rising climate change, material shortages, and sustainability, is that the decisions we make need to think about whole of life, total cost of ownership, and life cycle costing types of thinking. Maybe a material or a product feels superior when we compare its first cost, but is it going to be as superior and as appropriate if we think about a 30-year life cycle of that building? So maybe we still decide the product or material or technology that is the lowest cost, first cost, and not take a material that is maybe expensive initially, but over the life of the project, it is, or the asset is cheaper, but at least we would make a prudent decision. So therefore, it is very crucial if we have to embrace issues related to circularity, meaning recycle and reuse of materials. We have to be conscious about sustainability and the environment. We must look at a longer time horizon. We are all familiar with, and Shailesh, you are a structural engineer, I know by training, you talk earthquake and structural design, you know design life, you know about durability, you know about the operation of the building or the asset. Why not bring that expertise and thinking up front? And when a designer and constructor working together are making choices and selections about technologies and materials and products, why can't they embrace more and more that whole life thinking, and actually a whole of asset thinking also? If I displace or change the exterior envelope, what are the implications and impacts over the life of the asset, and what are the implications on other building components if I make that change. So I think really it's a chess you've played so far. I think you've done a 2D chess. You need to now, Shailesh, in the next program, you need to play 3D or 4D chess. And I know you can, and you need to bring these other pieces in the innovation journey together. Mike?
Mike?
I think those points are really crucial, really important, and very valid. I think I just returned to a comment that Anil made earlier on, which was about the importance of people in this whole scenario. And I think that one of the things that we tend to do with residential buildings is we tend to design, procure, and deliver them, and then almost forget about how they're performing in use, because there's a whole series of either owner-occupiers or tenants that have different use categories. And unlike commercial buildings or industrial buildings, which might have quite a sophisticated O&M regime that we would map out, I think sometimes we miss out on gathering data about the performance of buildings in use in the residential sector. Although internationally, there are lots and lots of really good examples of how post-occupancy evaluation and other techniques have been used to harvest data around the performance in use and feed that back into some sort of a data repository, as such as Anil referred to earlier on. And I think that for me is really highlights the importance of that defragmentation of the industrial sort of value chain. So I think that I would highlight everything that Anil said and overlay that with this notion of actively monitoring and gathering performance data in use and finding a way to feed that back into an informed, inclusive design process to enhance and iterate construction forms as we go forward.
I think, Mike, that connects to the living lab or this lighthouse projects, which are living labs, or the living lab, Mike, that you have in your backyard at Liverpool John Moores University, and how you are and your students and researchers are monitoring these modular houses, literally full-scale houses sitting in the campus of the university. Maybe you want to connect that with what's happening or could happen in India jointly?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that whilst the notion of design life for residential buildings has sort of a fixed period of time, in practice, of course, they are utilized for much longer time duration than their design life often. And the whole issue of retrofit and performance enhancement within their lifetime has become a really important factor, particularly around the sustainability agenda and in connection with issues such as aging population and the changing needs of people in the residential setting. So our innovation zone at the campus here in Liverpool is actually based on having built a series of houses that replicate the typologies of houses in the existing stock, and then being able to experiment and improve those in situ and monitor them and inform the students that we're educating to go out as change agents about the importance of that connection with existing stock while it's in use.
Yeah, very nicely said, very nicely covered. Let me move to next question. From a building safety perspective, how does modular construction help? What role do digital technologies play in ensuring decisions are made correctly and documented over the life of the constructed asset?
Mike?
Shall I repeat?
Well, I think that there are a whole set of aspects to this. If we take the notion that digitization of design and sharing of performance information through the sector and through the whole of the infrastructure is a thing that we're able to do through digitization of the information. One of the things that we are able to do is to look at safety challenges in buildings in use and feed those back into some sort of a digital model. I think here in the UK and in other places over recent years, there have been some very high-profile tragedies around performance of buildings, for example, in fire. And I think that the ability to model things like fire performance, evacuation modeling, and so forth is something that digitization can help with. In terms of the modularization and the improvements in safety because of that, if we can minimize the extent of on-site intervention and maximize the quality control of off-site, then we take out a series of variables that can impact on building safety as a consequence of quality control and quality regime going forward. So they're just a couple of aspects I think that I would focus in on. What are your thoughts, Anil?
Absolutely. So I think I'll like to address a couple of issues, digital, of course, but also the issue of standards. With what you are doing, Shailesh, in the affordable housing sector, you're essentially, in a way, bringing construction closer to manufacturing, bringing construction into a cleaner, safer, controlled environment.
Yes.
And you are minimizing what I call the dirty, dangerous, and difficult tasks that a construction worker has to do on a construction site, reducing that to a very scientifically designed assembly process only. So with that, you're actually having an impact on how people are going to get attracted to our sector. You can bring more and more interest in our sector because now it's mechanized, it's industrialized, and you're using advanced technologies, not only construction technologies, but perhaps digital technologies also. So that's, I think, the first aspect. The second thing is, as you embrace these technologies and build such large scale housing in India, perhaps you should consider utilizing some international standards that are globally accepted. I know that the Bureau of Indian Standards provides a number of standards, but beyond that, there are modular standards also being developed around the world, because in a way, if you utilize modular, industrialized, advanced technology construction and housing, it is becoming newer. It is newer for every person in that value chain. It's new for the local building department, the agency that gives permits, inspects. In fact, it's new for a project manager. So if I was a project manager on a traditional construction project versus a project manager on a construction site where you're using these advanced technologies, there is a shift. Are we teaching those shifts or changes in project management and structural design, in other aspects in our universities? So that's another connection that you can see with these new technologies. Therefore, standards are very crucial. In the UK, there is a new standard that talks about modular construction, and how do you, similarly, Singapore has a new standard on modular construction or industrialized construction. US is also aggressively moving in that direction. In fact, there is a significant effort going on here where we're talking about either single trade or multi-trade assemblies that can help foster construction, increase the certainty of schedule and cost, make construction safer, increase quality, improve quality, and all those aspects in construction. So therefore, I think there is a significant role that international standards can play, and it has far-reaching implications. One of the things that I would like to see happen with your leadership is maintenance of the data that is happening. So how much time does it take on, because you're really doing not only lighthouse projects, you're also implementing in many other projects. So is there a way to gather data that can inform decisions as this becomes mainstream and more projects come online? So gathering, documenting, classifying, and reporting that data would also be very crucial.
Very nicely. Yeah. My next question is about cost, because cost is something which bothers everyone. So, being international experts, I would like to ask you, what do we do about the perceived high cost of innovative, affordable housing technologies? Can economies of scale help overcome the issue of cost?
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. I think it's interesting that you use the word perceived there, because I think that the evidence suggests that the early phases of innovative technologies are more expensive than traditional forms. And of course, whilst there's a limited unit output, the unit cost is always bound to be higher. So the economies of scale will of course address that. I think the real question is, rather than will economies of scale help this, how do we achieve the economies of scale? How do we move to that position? And I think that I'd return to some of the comments that I made in response to your first question about the sort of the win-win culture around the integration and development of innovation. And I think that there are a series of mechanisms and tools that can be deployed to move innovators further forward and shift those early adopters into a genuine first wave of large-scale adopters. And there's incentivization schemes, of course. There's visible and financial commitment to R&D at a government level and a national level, and also there are the procurement options which encourage innovation within procurement and value the innovation as part of the procurement scoring matrix. And I think all of these things can move us towards the economies of scale. And as that happens, the unit cost and this issue of affordability relative to traditional rationalized construction will start to improve. So I think that product adoption curve that's very well documented in lots of sectors is a well-trodden path, and just pushing people further along it to achieve the economies of scale is the challenge right now.
I think it's really an interesting question, which is asked anytime you start discussing new technology. Probably we've heard it for 20 years now. Oh, it's too expensive, it's too costly. I think the first discussion or debate we need to have, and we probably have had many times, is an honest comparison. What do I mean by that? Yes. What is the real cost of a traditionally constructed affordable housing unit? Keep in mind, the lowest bidder or the lowest tender price is not the final price that you should be comparing with, because there are a lot of wastes, there are a lot of inefficiencies, and plus we do not take into account the environmental harm perhaps the traditional technologies do. We need to combine all those costs of traditionally building affordable housing in order to do a true comparison. And I can bet you if we did that, what I call the honest comparison, the advanced technologies, emerging technologies will turn out to be cheaper overall when a solid comparison is made. Energy efficiency, comfort of the occupants, life of the building, the speed of construction. Remember, Shailesh, we worked together on creating an evaluation matrix.
Multi-attributable.
We combine the costs of all those elements and do a true comparison between the two. I don't think cost will remain an issue, because we need to not only think of the whole of life of the building, but other aspects and benefits also. What's the time value of money? Rather than building and giving an end user who needs a house today in 18 months or 24 months, if I can give that house in 6 months, what's the value of that to the end user? So I think a true comparison needs to be done by the sponsoring agency, by the owner, the client, the developer, from that lens or from that perspective. So that's the first point. And after overcoming that discussion, I think there needs to be a number of strategies that the industry, government need to put together. When I was working with you in India, I know the discussion relating to an unnecessary obstacle of using advanced technologies such as excise tax and other kinds of taxes, because it was considered any building component produced off-site was considered a different class or category for taxation purposes, and we were unnecessarily burdening 5 to 10% over and above a traditional in situ construction. Why should that be? Why should you disincentivize something that is helping construction workers, that is helping end users? I'm sure that has been addressed by now, but there are similar blockers, hindrances, and disincentives that need to be removed. Forget about incentives, government incentives, subsidies for new technology. I think first, if you can carefully remove the disincentives of regulation, of code compliance perhaps, and other biases that exist in the traditional system, I think we'll be able to address this issue of high first cost. But yes, there will be investment. Now, do you want to invest in your workers, in your technology as a construction company, as the industry moves forward? I think most progressive, prudent construction companies will make that decision. And you're probably seeing that in large construction companies in India as well.
Wonderful. Both of you being international experts, I want you both of you to explain to my viewers what is industrial construction and is it really relevant to Indian affordable housing provisions?
Okay. No, I think I can maybe begin and
Yes.
Mike can support my response. So industrialized construction is what I was talking about earlier, where you start thinking about taking workplace activities that are difficult, dangerous, and dirty, and bringing them into a manufacturing environment. And that's, if you look at the 6 or 7 categories that you explained to us in the beginning of this podcast, they are all in a way doing that, be it tunnel form, be it lost form. They're all trying to bring some portion of the workplace activities into a controlled environment. And I'm not saying off-site. You can do off-site, near-site, on-site. Industrialized construction is not equal to off-site construction. So once you start bringing that advanced manufacturing thinking into your construction processes, what happens is you're shifting workplace activities into a controlled environment. You're making assembly efforts in a very systematic and well-designed manner. But the benefit of that is now you can bring other technologies and trends of Industry 4.0, for example, into your manufacturing environment. You can start using automation and robotics in making these components. You can start utilizing maybe 3D printing or additive manufacturing when you have brought a panel or any other component into your manufactured or a controlled environment. You can start bringing multiple trades together. Remember, in most building construction projects, you generally let one trade go in at a time. So if you are doing mechanical, you want to send the electrical or the plumbing guy to the next floor or a different unit. But here, if you're doing it in a controlled environment, you can bring multiple trades together, speed up the construction. So industrialized construction is a paradigm where we try to utilize manufacturing principles, Industry 4.0 technologies, and other enablers, technology and process enablers that help push the affordable housing towards a much more systematic and controlled way of construction. So that is industrialized construction. Yes, it is definitely applicable to the Indian affordable housing construction scenario also. Some pieces and components are already happening with the 6 categories that you explained. Already some of it is taking place. It's a matter of now taking a much more holistic view and seeing what else can benefit that process, and look at Industry 4.0, smart factories. What are they doing with data? What are they doing with design technologies? And it basically will help promote advanced and innovative construction technologies in the Indian housing sector. You can use principles such as what comes from manufacturing called design for manufacturing and assembly. So a designer starts thinking of products and assemblies rather than beginning from basically a clean slate. So the DFMA process is part of the industrialized construction process, where you bring that data and your knowledge upfront of how it's going to be manufactured and assembled on the site. So I think those are the pieces that will benefit the overall construction of affordable housing in India. I still believe, and I think I told you when we were discussing, that sticks and bricks will not get you the 2022 target. And I think you are now very keenly aware that it is advanced technologies that will help. Mike?
I would absolutely reinforce everything that you've said there, and I think that the optimization of manufacture through industrialized processes is a potentially huge benefit to the Indian affordable housing sector. I think it extends through beyond the actual process of manufacture, right the way through the supply chain as well, in terms of optimizing supply chains, minimization of waste, managing of logistics and delivery, and carbon footprinting through some of those systems and processes that come from manufacture. And I think that there's still quite a lot to learn in the construction sector from other sectors such as automotive, manufacturing and aerospace, where of course process improvement for them is measured in seconds. And so they're very, very advanced at this. And there's one particular innovative construction organization in the UK that has built a huge off-site manufacturing plant. Well, that was actually designed and orchestrated by automotive designers and engineers rather than colleagues from within the construction sector. And I think that knowledge sharing from other sectors could be a useful and important way to maximize the step forward.
Okay. My next question is about the functional performance. Whenever we talk about these emerging construction systems, Anil will agree with me that we always talk about, comfort, fire resistance is something very big in India. Then we talk about thermal efficiency, we talk about acoustics. So my next question is the functional performance of innovative technologies should play a crucial role in selecting the appropriate technology for a housing project. How can the decision makers base their selections using this information?
Mike, if you want to take that first.
Okay. I think that it's essential there's a coherent and consistent framework for the evaluation and benchmarking of these functional KPIs. And I think that matrices such as the one that you and Anil developed for comparison of different offsite or modular building forms is a useful way to get clear, consistent comparison between different options and setting benchmark standards for functional performance. So I think an informed approach to option appraisal at the outset based on a matrix that identifies what functional performance is really important. And extending the scope of what we mean by functional performance, I guess, whether that is actually performance in use in terms of comfort, energy costs, maintainability, maintenance costs per square meter or so on, or whether that is something that also extends through to sustainability credentials, durability and the materials and selection of materials, I think could be a very useful way forward. Well,
I think to me, given what we have seen recently, and these are very controversial and tricky topics, the fire in London, Grenfell Tower, the recent collapse of the building in Florida, these are international examples, the collapse of a bridge in Italy and so on, brings home this idea that it's, again, not just about design and construction. It is really about the functional performance of these buildings. It is, as a fraternity of designers, constructors, and asset operators, it is crucial we understand that, take on board in all decision making how those pieces fit together. In many parts of the world now, they've started procuring construction based on those aspects also. So it's no longer about the bid. It's not about the technical or the commercial components of the bid or the tender. It's also about the social issues, environmental issues, human issues. So there fit all these things: fire rating, building safety, thermal comfort, end user acceptance. In India, it has been a huge challenge. I think in UK and in other parts of the world, when we just decided to build through technology housing units that were not what the end user wanted. And many of them remained vacant and actually brought bad name to this whole idea of modular prefab construction for housing. So I think it's extremely crucial to take it beyond just design and construction and bring that input also into the mix. There are many efforts going on. RICS is involved in the UK in something called procuring for value. Don't procure for cost, procure for value, because it's ultimately that value, that impact on the end user, which is crucial. I know, Shailesh, you know of many older housing projects where some home end users refused
Yes.
to take possession of the housing units that were given to them, not simply because of performance, but also because of lack of information or misinformation that these are somehow bad technologies. These are hollow walls, these are weaker walls, they are not traditional. So it's a whole set of complicated issues that must be addressed. Some of those can be addressed through education. And I think the work that you're doing is expanding to educate the end user also, that these are technologies that have been tested, proven, and take into account the functional performance. That is where the importance of this issue lies, really. If we do not take that into account while procuring and selecting technologies, it can become a challenge downstream for us.
Very nicely said. Very nicely said. My next question is, about the training of construction workers. It's a big problem here in India. So I would like to pose a question. How do we influence the construction worker training ecosystem to make them ready for advanced housing technologies?
Mike, would you like to start? Then I can follow up.
Yeah, sure thing. I think one of the things that strikes me straight away around the context that you're dealing with here is the scale of the issue, the number of people involved in this, and the extent of training that needs to be put into place is huge. And I think that we need to see the skills and training agenda in the context of the construction sector as a sort of skills escalator. So from the sort of hands-on craftsperson on site through to the more senior site-based operative, supervisors, designers, constructors, and commissioners, that education and skills chain needs to be connected right the way through, so that there's a totality of understanding from sort of cradle to cradle within the sector. And I think that that the deployment of train the trainer kind of strategies can be useful in embedding a kind of pyramid selling almost of learning. The online modules that you're putting together associated with this podcast that we're doing now, I think are immensely useful at hitting a lot of people in a very, very resource efficient and information efficient way. And I wonder whether, since we're using more advanced technologies in certain places, the use of augmented reality learning and the demonstration of that in certain contexts for certain things could be a useful way to ensure a technological grasp and technological certainty around some of the training issues that we face when we adopt new technologies. In the UK in the 1950s and 60s, there were some terrible examples of system buildings that failed as a consequence not of design failures, but a lack of understanding of the operatives on site about how these new technologies were to be assembled, and a differentiation between the new technologies and the traditional forms of construction that they were used to. So that education provision right down to the lowest level of operative on site is absolutely crucial to ensuring that they are implemented effectively.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say it's sort of a three-pronged issue: people, image, and investment. So as I said from the beginning, housing is a people's issue. People who build them, people who are going to live in them, and so on. So really, without getting the people part sorted out, it's not possible just that technology will help solve this issue. So training, appropriate training, bringing up to speed in terms of advanced technology, the workforce is extremely crucial. The second is investment. Who invests in that training? I think in India, to a large extent, the government is doing a whole bit in bringing that training. I think we need to now expand that to training the workforce on site as well to understand some of these advanced technologies. You can use digital tools to train even the construction workers. So I think that's something that is going to be very crucial. Lastly, I think it's also about image. Generally, globally, our sector has a poor image in attracting the right kind of workforce. that needs to be addressed. With the embracing of industrialized construction, manufacturing techniques, advanced technologies, materials, and products, I think we can address that to some extent. Couple that with the use of digital technologies, such as building information modeling, digital twins, and other things, 3D printing, we can further enhance and improve the image of the sector and attract the right workforce to whom we can then provide the training and get them ready for deploying and mainstreaming of these advanced technologies.
Thank you. My next question is about maintenance of services. As you know, this is a perennial question being asked by architects and engineers. So I would just like to pose this question: how do we carry out maintenance of services? That is water line, electrical cables, sanitary installation, sewerage, etc. Once the buildings are put to use in industrialized building construction.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge, and that's why from the very beginning, and I think many times during this conversation, we have brought up this issue of whole of life. So creating an atrium in a commercial building where you can't reach that height to provide maintenance services is perhaps not a great design. So it is this entire issue of a designer thinking like a constructor and an operator of the constructed asset, a constructor being able to think like a designer, and asset operator, and an asset operator being able to share what they're learning about the existing buildings into the design and construction process, so that we don't keep on making the same mistakes. I think that needs to be sorted out, because we know for a fact that maintenance, servicing, all those of services and other components of the building is a challenge. And if we don't give enough thought early on in the design process, it's going to continue that way. There are strategies. Why do we only stop at design for manufacture and assembly? I think we should think about design for manufacture, assembly, operation, maintenance, retrofit, reuse, recycle. And that's how we can sort this issue out.
Mike, would you like to add? Mike?
I think that I would endorse everything that Anil said there. And I think that the issue about services that you specifically focused on in your question is an interesting one as we move to potentially modular forms of construction, because the notion that you can actually create subsystems within the modular construction that promote replaceability or serviceability during their life may be something that it needs to be built into the design thresholds and the benchmarking that we undertake at the outset.
Okay. Okay, so my next question is, at present, there are very few agencies in India who work on these technologies. So in your viewpoint, how can it be scaled up to bring more and more players in the arena to cater to growing urban needs of housing and infrastructure in India?
Anil, would you like to take this one to begin with?
Sure. So I think one obviously solution is to think of business models that will help facilitate the use of technology. We can't use traditional business models that work for the traditional construction methods, the design, bid, build kind of archaic procurement processes. So we need to rethink business models. How can new businesses come into play and utilize these innovative business models to become successful in the use of advanced technologies, materials, and products in the affordable housing sector? I think next really is the issue of bringing enough maturity into our existing players. So it's a matter of looking at the international markets, how international other countries, other markets are addressing this issue. I know that in the UK, for example, they're moving into something called maybe an enterprise arrangement rather than a transactional arrangement. So if I have to get 10,000 housing units built in a location, that's a very large scale project. Why do I need to enter into partnerships with contractors, subcontractors, vendors, and suppliers on a transactional basis? Why can't I partner with them in more like an enterprise arrangement where it becomes a win-win situation rather than a win-lose adversarial situation? So I think some of it can be addressed through innovative thinking and new business models.
So with this, yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely endorse that, and I think also there's a lot to be said. I think for perhaps a sharing culture of things that are not commercially conflicting between entrance to the markets, to make entry into new areas of operation easier for people and organizations that are seeking to produce the end products. I think that the sector-wide transition to move towards these new technologies is something that's got to be seen to be beneficial to all of the people involved within it. And that win-win kind of culture that I talked about earlier on probably relies on a lot of flexibility in the orchestrators and commissioners of the demand in terms of what they will be receptive to, that allows different operators to step into the market in a way that's actually beneficial to them and to the market itself.
So with this, my last question is, Anil will agree with me that every time when we talk about these new construction systems, we always compare, we always take the life of the houses being constructed by our grandfathers and all for granted. They will outlive us. So the last question is, what about service life and durability of these buildings built with these systems?
That's a very interesting question. Maybe we need to start thinking about slightly differently in this time of advancement and movement of people. Do we really mean, I have lived in houses where I have moved on, maybe 5 years, after 5 years, I'm in a new house, maybe I'm different. We need to think slightly differently, perhaps. And if we look at obviously durability, service life is crucial, but with the help of new technologies, can we think of reuse, recycle, and think of durability and those kinds of things in a different light? But I do get the point. I mean, you will always be reminded that your grandparents built a building which lasted 100 years, and now you're talking about a prefab building that can be taken down after 10 years, and maybe its components go somewhere else and used for something else. Is it time for us to start thinking differently?
Mike, would you like to add something?
I think it probably is time for us to start thinking differently.
Yes.
Technologically and in terms of durability and performance and use, there's no reason why a modular or off-site produced dwelling should be have any less lifespan than a traditionally built home. I think though that if you think back to that building that your grandfather built 100 years ago, and think about the way that people interfaced with buildings 100 years ago and what's changed now, I think that we need to reflect the fact that over time, the way that we live in dwellings changes. My grandfather didn't have a refrigerator or a television or work from home in his office space. They were tiny little kitchens which had no utilities in them. So I think that one of the ideas around the kind of potential modular option is that you can change and reform and recycle and evolve the footprint and the very space that you're in, which is perhaps more difficult than with a traditional property. But in terms of absolute functional performance and standards, they should be at least as good, shouldn't they? And last at least as long.
Thank you. I think that's all. With this, we come to end of this great session, and I have no words to express my gratitude towards both of you for acceding to my request and respond to each question so passionately and elaborately. Thank you very much, Anil, and thank you very much, Professor Mike. With people like you around supporting our mission and supporting me, I am confident that mission of Government of India to bring a paradigm shift in the way we build by introducing cutting edge technologies will be a great success. And these emerging systems will be the technologies of the future in India. Also, we are hoping that the day is not far when India will become global leaders in the area of innovative construction technologies. So thank you, Anil. Thank you, Mike. It's time for me to sign off, and I will come again with another session on another new set of technologies with other experts. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Best of luck. Keep going. There's a long journey ahead for you.
Best wishes to both of you, and we'll meet again. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Take care.